She spat blood into the dirt at his boots and whispered, "Mister, just let me die here." The dance hall went quiet. Every man in that room looked away. Every man except one. He was a cowboy. Nobody spoke to a ghost in a black coat who hadn't said a word in 3 years. And when he slowly rose from his chair, the whole town of Red Hollow, Montana, learned what a silent man sounds like when he finally decides to speak. Before we go further, hit that subscribe button. Stay with me till the very last minute and drop the name of your city in the comments, so I know how far this story has traveled tonight. The slap came before Rose Harper could lift her head. It landed hard enough to split her lip against her teeth, and the copper taste that flooded her mouth was not the first time that summer. It would not be the last. She caught herself on the edge of the long pine bar, fingers' white breath rattling in her chest like a loose nail in a tin can. "Get up." Martha Voss's voice was the same voice she used to call customers to supper. Soft, almost kind. Only the people who lived inside her walls knew what that softness hid. "I said get up, Harper, or do I have to drag you?" Rose pushed off the bar. Her knees buckled. She caught herself again. "I'm trying, ma'am." Try harder. The dance hall was full that night, the way it was full every night in July when the cattle drives pushed through Red Hollow, and the men came down off the trail with 3 months of wages burning holes in their pockets. The air was thick enough to chew whiskey tobacco sweat. Cheap rose water splashed over unwashed skin. A fiddle scraped in the corner. A piano missing 3 keys hammered out something that used to be a song. Nobody looked at Rose. Nobody ever looked at the girls when Martha was correcting them. That was the rule of the house, and everyone knew it, even the strangers. "You owe me $42, Harper," Martha said. "You owe me a roof. You owe me the dress you're standing in. And tonight, I have a paying gentleman asking after you specifically. And you are going to smile, and you are going to dance, and you are going to—" "I can't breathe, ma'am. I don't recall asking you to breathe. I recall asking you to work." A cough tore out of Rose before she could stop it. It folded her in half. She clamped one hand over her mouth and felt the wet heat come through her fingers dark and thick, and she knew without looking that it was blood again. Third time this week. She tried to hide her hand behind her skirt. Martha saw. Martha always saw. Martha always. "Oh, honey," Martha said, and her voice was sweet as spoiled milk. "You are not dying on my floor? You hear me? You are not dying where my customers can see." "Yes, ma'am." "Stand up straight." "Yes, ma'am." "Wipe your mouth." Rose wiped her mouth on the inside of her wrist. The rag she usually kept in her sleeve was already soaked through from the afternoon, balled up and hidden under her mattress upstairs. A man in a brown hat pushed through the crowd, then grinning like he'd won something. Cal Jeffries. Rose knew his name the way a rabbit knows the name of a certain hawk. He'd been asking after her for 2 weeks. "There's my sweet little widow," Jeffries said. "I've been waiting an hour, Martha. An hour." "She's coming to you right now, Mr. Jeffries. Ain't you, Rose?" Rose could not answer. Her lungs would not fill. "Say yes, Rose." "Yes." Louder. "Yes, ma'am." "There's a good girl." Martha turned to Jeffries with a smile so polished it could have been on display in a shop window. "She's a little tired from the heat. Summer's been wearing on her." "I'll wear on her plenty," Jeffries said, and the men at the nearest table laughed the way men laugh when they're afraid of being the only one not laughing. Rose felt Jeffries' hand close around her upper arm. He had thick, hot fingers. He smelled like sour beer and horse. "Mr. Jeffries," she said quietly, "please, I ain't well tonight. I can sit with you. I can listen. But I ain't well enough to—" "Girl, I didn't pay for conversation. Please." "Rose." Martha's voice was a blade now stripped of every pretense. "Do not embarrass me." "Ma'am, I'm sick." The second slap landed harder than the first. Rose hit the floor. The piano kept playing. The fiddle kept scraping. Somebody at the faro table laughed at something that had nothing to do with her. One of the other girls, Lottie, with her hair dyed the color of old brass, took a single step forward and then stopped, because stepping forward was how Lottie had earned the scar above her left eye. Rose tried to push herself up. Her arms shook. She got as far as her elbows and stopped there because the cough came back, and this time it did not let go. It shook her whole body. She tasted salt and iron and something sour underneath. When it finally passed, she saw the blood on the floorboards in front of her bright as a ribbon. "Oh, for God's sake," Martha hissed. Get her up before somebody sees." Jeffries bent down. His hand closed around Rose's hair. "Come on, widow. Please." "I said come on." He dragged her an inch. Her scalp burned. She heard herself make a sound she did not recognize, small and animal, and she thought very clearly, "This is where I die. Right here, on this floor, and nobody in this room is going to lift a finger." And that was when the chair scraped back in the corner. It was a small sound. Wooden legs on pine boards. In any other room, it would have meant nothing. But in Martha Voss's dance hall on a Saturday night in July, a chair scraping back when no one was calling for another drink meant something was about to happen, and every man in the room felt it before he understood it. The piano stumbled. The fiddle went flat. A glass clinked down on a table and stayed there. Jeffries's hand was still in Rose's hair. Footsteps came across the floor, slow, unhurried. The kind of walk a man uses when he knows nobody is going to stop him, and he is in no particular rush to arrive. Rose could not see him yet. Her eyes were full of tears, and her hair was in her face, and Jeffries' grip was twisting her neck sideways. But she heard Martha's voice change. "Mr. Boone," Martha said, and the sweetness was back, except now it was stretched thin over something like fear. "I didn't see you come in tonight." "Been here 2 hours, ma'am." "Well, can I get you something on the house?" "No, ma'am." "Is there something you need?" "Yes, ma'am. I need that man to take his hand out of that girl's hair." The room did not breathe. Jeffries laughed. It came out high and wrong. "Mister, I don't know who you think you are, but this ain't your business." "Reckon it is now." "This here's a paid transaction." I heard her say please. She's a whore friend. She's a woman on the floor. Rose felt Jeffries's grip tighten. She whimpered before she could stop herself, and the whimper landed in the silence like a stone dropped in a well. "Mr. Boone," Martha said fast, too fast. "Caleb, let's talk about this like reasonable people. Rose owes me $42. She is by contract obligated to $42. $42, yes, and that all." "I'm sorry. Is that all she owes you? 42? Martha hesitated. A woman like Martha Voss did not hesitate often. When she did, she was calculating. "Well," she said, "there's the matter of the dress and board, and name a number, ma'am." 60. $60, and she walks out clean. Caleb Boone did not answer right away. Rose still could not see him, but she heard the sound of a coin pouch opening. Heavy leather, a lot of coins. Then she heard them hit the bar. Not dropped, counted. 1 by 1. 60, Caleb said. "Count 'em yourself." "Mr. Boone, you don't have to—" "Count 'em, ma'am." Martha counted them. Rose heard her lips moving. The whole room heard her lips moving. When she reached 60, she stopped, and the silence that followed was the worst silence Rose had ever heard in her life, because it was the silence of a woman realizing that the rules of her own house had just been rewritten over her head. "Now," Caleb said, "tell this gentleman to let go of her hair." "Mr. Jeffries," Martha said flatly, "let go of her hair." Jeffries did not let go. "Martha, I paid for the night. I'll refund you." "I don't want a refund, I want—" "Mr. Jeffries." Caleb's voice did not rise. It did not have to. Rose felt Jeffries' grip tremble, actually tremble, and then his fingers opened, and her head fell forward, and she caught herself on her hands and stayed there on her knees gasping. Boots stopped beside her. "Ma'am?" Rose looked up. The man standing over her was not young. He was not handsome the way the drummers in the catalogs were handsome. He had a face that looked like it had been left out in the weather on purpose, and eyes the color of creek water at the end of a dry month, and a jaw set in a line that suggested he had not smiled in a very long time, and was not likely to start tonight. His coat was black and dust pale at the shoulders. His hat was in his left hand. His right hand hung easy at his side near his hip, near the gun, but not on it. "Ma'am," he said again softer, "can you stand?" "I don't know, sir." "You don't have to know. You just have to try." "I don't want to fall again." "I won't let you fall." Rose looked at his outstretched hand. It was a working hand, cracked across the knuckles, sun-dark scarred along the back of the thumb. It was not shaking. She put her bloody fingers in his. He lifted her as easy as lifting a sack of feed, and when her legs gave way, he caught her around the waist without ceremony and without lingering and set her on her feet and steadied her until she could stand on her own. "Mr. Boone," Martha said, "you cannot just walk her out of here. I just paid you $60, ma'am. There's a principle. There's a receipt. Write it." "What?" "Write it. Ink. Paper. Your signature. Her name. The number. The date. Write it." "Mr. Boone, ma'am, I am standing in your house in front of your customers with your money on your bar, and I am asking you politely one time to write a receipt. I would prefer not to ask a second way." Martha wrote the receipt. Her hand shook. The ink smeared. She slid the paper across the bar, and Caleb took it without looking at her, and folded it once, and put it inside his coat. Then he turned back to Rose. "Ma'am, is there anything upstairs belongs to you?" "A shawl and a Bible." "Whose Bible?" "My mother's." "Lottie," Caleb said, not taking his eyes off Rose. "You fetch it for her." Lottie stared. Then she nodded fast and small and ran for the stairs like the stairs were the only thing in the world. "Mr. Boone," Jeffries said. He had found his voice. "You are making a mistake." "Reckon I've made bigger ones." "You don't know what she is." "I know what she ain't." Meaning she ain't yours, she ain't hers. He tipped his head toward Martha. "And she ain't mine either. She's just a woman trying to breathe. And any man in this room who can't let a woman breathe, I got a problem with that man." The room did not move. Lottie came back down the stairs with a folded shawl and a small black book pressed to her chest. She held them out to Rose like she was handing over a newborn. Rose took them. Her hands were still shaking. "Thank you, Lottie," she whispered. "Rose," Lottie whispered back, "don't come back here. You hear me? Don't ever come back here. Not for nothing." "I hear you. Promise me." "I promise." Caleb touched his hat brim to Lottie. Lottie looked like she was going to cry and did not. "Ma'am," he said to Rose, "can you walk to the door?" "I can try." That's all I asked. He did not take her arm. He did not push her. He walked a half step behind her hat, in one hand, the other hand loose, and the crowd parted in front of Rose, the way crowds part in front of a coffin. No one said a word. Jeffries did not follow. Martha did not speak. The piano did not start again until the swinging doors had slapped shut behind them, and even then the piano did not sound the same. Outside, the July night hit Rose like a wall. The air was hot, but it was clean, and there was a wind coming down off the high plains that smelled like sage and dry grass and horses. And Rose breathed it in and coughed and breathed it in again, and the second breath was the first breath she had taken in 3 months that was hers. A dark horse was tied to the rail. Big chestnut gelding, tired eyes, a blanket roll behind the saddle, and a rifle in a scabbard along the flank. Caleb untied the reins. "Ma'am," he said, "my cabin is an hour ride north. There is a bed, there is water, there is a door with a lock, and I will sleep on the other side of that door, and nothing will come through it tonight. That is all I am offering. I am not asking for anything. I am not expecting anything. You can say no, and I will walk you to the church, and I will wake the preacher, and I will pay him to put you up for a week, and I will ride away, and you will never see me again. Which would you rather?" Rose stared at him. No one had asked her which she would rather in longer than she could remember. "Why?" she whispered. Why what, ma'am? Why are you doing this? Caleb looked down at his hat, then back at her. Ma'am, he said, a long time ago I made a promise to somebody I couldn't save. I have broken that promise every day since. I would like tonight to not break it again. That is all I got for an answer. I am sorry if it ain't enough. Rose's eyes filled. She did not know this man. She did not know his name until Martha had said it. She did not know if the cabin was real. She did not know if the bed was real. She did not know if the door with the lock was real. But she knew the dance hall was real. And she knew the blood on the floor was real. And she knew Cal Jeffrey's hand in her hair had been real. Mr. Boone, she said. Ma'am, I ain't got nothing to give you. I didn't ask for nothing, ma'am. I ain't well. I cough blood. I might not last the summer. I heard the doctor say it through the door last month. He told Martha I was a bad investment. Something moved across Caleb's face. It was there and gone so fast she almost missed it. It looked like rage. It looked like grief. It looked like a man hearing a thing he had heard before in another life, in another voice about another woman. Ma'am, he said quietly, you are not an investment. No, sir. Can you ride? I don't know. Can you hold on to me if I put you up? I can try. That's all I asked. He set his hat on his head. He turned the horse. He bent and caught her under the arms, as gently as a man lifts a child out of a cradle, and he set her sideways across the saddle in front of him. And he swung up behind her in a single motion, and his arm came around her waist, steady as a post. Ma'am, he said close to her ear, you lean back against me. You sleep if you can. You cough if you need to. You do not apologize for either one. Is that understood? Yes, sir. Say my name. Mr. Boone. Caleb? Caleb. Yes, ma'am. The chestnut stepped out into the street. Red Hollow fell away behind them, the piano, the fiddle, the yellow light spilling out of the swinging doors. The woman at the bar counting $60 a third time to make sure she had not dreamed it. The man in the brown hat who would wake up in the morning with no woman and no money and no story, he could tell without shame. Rose laid her head against Caleb Boone's chest because she could no longer hold it up on her own. She felt his heartbeat under her ear, steady, slow, a working man's heart. She closed her eyes. Caleb, she whispered. Ma'am. My name is Rose Harper. My husband was Thomas. He died in the Copperhead mine 2 winters ago. I want somebody to know that, in case I don't wake up. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. The chestnut's hooves struck the hard summer road in a slow, even rhythm. Rose Harper, he said finally, you are going to wake up. You don't know that. No, ma'am, I don't. But I am going to act like I do, and I am going to ask you to act like I do, and between the two of us, we are going to get to sunrise. Is that a deal? Rose pressed her bloody fingers into the front of his coat and held on. That's a deal, Caleb. Yes, ma'am. And the chestnut carried them north out of Red Hollow into the dark summer grass, under a sky so full of stars it looked like somebody had spilled salt across a black tablecloth. And behind them in the dance hall, Martha Voss was already writing a letter to a man named Rafe Dillard and sealing it with red wax and pressing her thumb into the wax hard enough to leave a mark. The chestnut carried them an hour into the dark before Rose Harper spoke again. Caleb? Ma'am, if I fall, don't stop. That ain't a deal I'm making. Please? No, ma'am. She was too tired to argue. Her cheek was pressed flat against the rough wool of his coat, and every time the horse took a long stride, her ribs lit up like somebody had struck a match inside them. She counted the strides to keep from coughing. She got to 30 and lost count. Caleb. Ma'am? Is the cabin real? It's real. You ain't lying to me. Ma'am, I have done a lot of things in my life I ain't proud of. Lying to a sick woman on a horse ain't gonna be one of 'em tonight. Rose closed her eyes. She did not mean to sleep. She only meant to rest her eyes for a breath. But the steady thud of the chestnut's hooves and the slow heat of the man behind her and the clean wind coming down off the ridge all folded together, and the next thing she knew, the horse had stopped moving, and Caleb was speaking very quietly into her hair. Rose Harper. Yes. We're here. I'm gonna lift you down. I can walk. No, ma'am, you cannot. He was right. When her feet touched dirt, her knees folded like wet paper, and Caleb caught her before she knew she was falling. He carried her the way a man carries a wounded animal. He is afraid of hurting worse. One arm under her knees and one behind her shoulders, and she felt the hard edge of his pistol belt against her hip and the soft scratch of his beard against her forehead, and she thought, he hasn't shaved in 3 days, maybe 4. It was the first idle thought she'd had in a month. A door opened. A latch lifted. She heard a dog somewhere inside make one low sound of greeting and then go quiet when Caleb said a single word she did not catch. Ma'am, he said, the bed is clean. The sheets are clean. I washed them myself last Sunday. I am going to set you down and then I am going to go stand on the porch for a minute while you decide what you want to do with yourself. Yes or no? Yes. He set her on the edge of the bed. He took off his hat. He walked out. Rose sat there with her mother's Bible in her lap and her shawl over her shoulders and the sound of a dog's paws clicking across a wooden floor on the other side of the wall, and she tried very hard to understand what had happened to her in the last 2 hours. She could not. Her mind was a kite with a cut string. She pulled off her boots because Martha would have whipped her for getting boots on a clean quilt, and the habit was stronger than the knowledge that Martha was not here, and she laid down on her side and pulled the quilt up to her chin, and she was asleep before the second breath. She did not hear Caleb come back in. She did not hear him crouch by the hearth and coax the banked coals back into a flame. She did not hear him set a kettle. She did not hear him pull a wooden chair to the doorway of the bedroom and sit in it, rifle across his knees, and watch the dark road he had just ridden in from the way a man watches a fuse. She slept 9 hours. When she woke, the cabin smelled like coffee and cornbread, and something with onions in it, and the light coming through the gap in the curtain was the hard white light of late morning. And for one breath, she did not remember where she was, and her body clenched so tight she thought her ribs would crack. Ma'am. Caleb's voice, from the other side of the door. You're in my cabin. You're safe. I'm on the porch. There is water on the washstand and a clean shirt of mine on the chair, which will be too big, but it will be clean. There is no one else in this house except a dog named Juno. Juno does not bite. I will be out here when you are ready. Take your time. Rose lay very still. She listened. She listened for a man's boot on a floorboard. She listened for Martha's voice. She listened for the fiddle. She listened for the piano missing 3 keys. She heard a bird. She heard wind in a tin roof. She heard a horse blow out through his nose far off. She heard a dog closer make one soft sound and then settle. She put her hand on her own chest. She was still breathing. She sat up. She washed her face. The water in the basin turned pink before it turned brown. She did not look in the small mirror above the washstand because she was afraid of what would look back at her. She put on Caleb's shirt over her own torn bodice because her own dress had blood on the front of it, and she could not bear the weight of it another minute, and the shirt came down to her knees and smelled like cedar soap and sun. She opened the door. The dog looked up from the rug. Caleb looked up from a tin cup on the porch rail through the open front door. Neither of them moved. Ma'am, Caleb said. Mr. Boone? Caleb. Caleb. Yes, ma'am. I slept a long time. You slept 9 hours. I'm sorry. That was not an accusation, ma'am. That was an accounting. She almost smiled. She didn't quite. But something at the corner of her mouth moved, and Caleb saw it, and he looked down into his coffee like a man who had seen something he was not allowed to look at directly. There's cornbread, he said, and beans, and coffee. You eat what you can. You don't eat what you can't. Nobody is counting. I ain't hungry. Ma'am, you are going to eat anyway. Yes, sir. She sat at his small pine table. He did not sit across from her. He stayed on the porch and left the door open so she could see him, and so he could see the road, and she understood without being told that the open door was for her, and the view of the road was for him. She ate 3 bites of cornbread. She drank half a cup of coffee. She coughed twice, and both times she turned her face into her sleeve, and both times when she looked back, the cloth came away clean, and the clean cloth was the most frightening thing she had seen all morning because she did not trust it. "Caleb?" "Ma'am?" "Why ain't you asking me anything?" "About what?" "About me. About how I got there. About the $42. About any of it." Caleb turned his tin cup a half turn on the rail. "Figured you'd tell me when you wanted to tell me." "And if I don't want to?" "Then you don't. That ain't how it works." "It's how it works here." She stared at the back of his head. "I don't understand you, Mr. Boone." "Caleb, ma'am." "I don't understand you, Caleb." "That's all right. I don't understand me either. Finish your coffee." She finished her coffee. By the end of that first day, she had learned 3 things about the cabin and the man who owned it, and all 3 of them rearranged something in her chest. The first was that he slept on the floor. She found out by accident. She woke up in the night needing the chamber pot, and when she cracked the bedroom door, she saw him rolled in a bedroll in front of the hearth rifle, laid along the length of his body, like a second spine boots on hat over his face. He did not stir. Juno the dog lifted her head from the rug and looked at Rose with liquid brown eyes and laid her head back down. Rose closed the door very, very softly, and she sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, with her hand over her mouth. And she did not cry, because crying cost breath, and she did not have breath to spend, but she came close. The second was that the door to her room had a lock, an inside lock, iron, set into the frame by hand, new. The wood around it was pale where the bolt had been cut, and the screws were still bright. He had put it in that morning while she slept. She had heard dimly a sound like a chisel, and she had thought it was a dream. It was not a dream. The third was that he did not touch her, not once, not by accident, not on purpose. When he passed her a plate, he set it down on the table and then stepped back before she reached for it. When she stumbled coming in from the porch on the second morning and nearly went down, his hand came up fast and then stopped an inch from her elbow and hovered there until she had her balance and then dropped. He would not lay a finger on her without an invitation, and she did not know how to invite, because no one had ever required her invitation before. On the third day, she tried to pay him back. She was in the kitchen corner washing a tin plate, and her hands were shaking so badly the plate rang against the basin like a bell. "Caleb." "Ma'am." "I cannot give you $60. I did not ask for $60. "I know. That's the problem." He looked up from the harness he was oiling. "Ma'am." "A debt I don't know how to pay back is worse than a debt I do." Caleb set the harness down. "Rose Harper." "Yes, that $60 was not a loan." "Then what was it?" "It was $60 I had in a tin under the floorboard that was not doing anybody any good, and there was a woman bleeding on a floor in front of me, and now the $60 is gone, and the woman is not bleeding on a floor, and I call that a fair trade." "Caleb." "I am not finished, ma'am." "I'm sorry. You do not owe me $60. You do not owe me $42. You do not owe me a dress or a meal or a bed or a roof. If you want to stay, you stay. If you want to go, I will saddle the chestnut and take you to Miss Abernathy's boarding house in Willow Creek, which is a Christian establishment, and I will pay a month in advance, and that will also not be a loan. Those are your 2 options. There is not a third option where you owe me something. Is that understood?" "Why?" "Because I said so, ma'am." "That ain't an answer." "It's the only one I got today." She stood with the wet plate in her hand, and the soap sliding off her knuckles, and the hard summer light coming through the window behind her, and she looked at this quiet gray-eyed man, and she understood for the first time in 2 years that she was being treated like a person. It broke something in her. She did not cry loud. She cried the way a person cries who has learned crying costs rent, shoulders tight, face still, tears walking down her face one at a time like people leaving a burning building in an orderly line. Caleb did not come to her. He did not say, "They're there." He did not tell her not to cry. He picked up the harness and went back to oiling it slow and steady, and he let her have her weeping the way a man lets rain fall on a field that needs it. When she was done, she wiped her face on the tail of his shirt because she was wearing his shirt, and she said, "Caleb." "Ma'am." "I'll stay. A little while, till my lungs come back, till I can work." "That's fine, ma'am." "I can cook, some. I can mend." "Good. I kept the books for my husband's shift at the Copperhead for 18 months before the collapse. I can cipher. I can read anything you put in front of me." Caleb's hand stilled on the harness. "You kept the books?" "Yes, sir." "At the mine?" "Yes, sir. The foreman couldn't write past his own name. Thomas taught me. I did the tally every Friday for a pound of flour a week." Caleb looked at her for a long moment. "Ma'am," he said, "I have a box of receipts on the shelf over that door that has not been opened in 2 years. If you want a job, it is yours. I will pay you what I can, which is not much, and I will feed you, which will be steady, and I will not stand over you while you work." "Yes, sir." "Caleb. Caleb." "Yes, ma'am." And that was how Rose Harper became the bookkeeper of a one-man ranch 10 miles north of Red Hollow, Montana, in the hottest July anyone could remember. The first week, she slept more than she worked. The second week, she worked in short bursts and slept the rest. By the end of the second week, she could walk to the well without stopping, and by the end of the third week, she could pull the bucket up herself, though she was lightheaded for an hour afterward and had to sit in the shade of the porch with Juno's head in her lap. Her cough did not vanish. It softened. She began to eat. Not much, not at first, but she finished a bowl of beans one night without setting the spoon down halfway through, and when she looked up, Caleb was staring at the bowl like it was the first sunrise he had ever seen, and then he looked away fast, as if he had been caught at something shameful. They talked in pieces. He asked her about Thomas. "A good man," she said. "Not a big man, a kind one. He laughed when I burned the biscuits. He prayed over his boots before he went down in the morning." The morning of the collapse he forgot, and he turned around at the door and came back and prayed over him, and it made him 5 minutes late, and 5 minutes later he would have been in the tunnel they had to dig out for 3 days to find him in. Those 5 minutes were the most expensive 5 minutes of my life. Caleb nodded and did not say anything because there was nothing to say. She asked him once about the war. He said, "Ma'am?" She said, "I'm sorry, I won't ask again." He said, "I would appreciate that," and that was all. But on the 9th day, something shifted that Rose could not at first explain. She had been carrying eggs in from the small coop behind the cabin, 4 of them in the bowl of her apron, when she heard a horse on the road that was not Caleb's chestnut. She heard it before Caleb did, because Caleb was inside nailing a shelf. The sound of unfamiliar hooves on the hard summer dirt knocked the breath out of her in a single punch. She dropped the apron. 2 eggs broke. She did not notice. "Caleb!" Her voice came out thin. "Caleb!" He was already at the door. "Ma'am, somebody's coming." "I hear him." "Caleb." Inside Rose. "Caleb, please, please, if it's—" "Inside. Now. Bolt the door. Do not open it for any voice but mine, and when I come to the door I will say your name twice. Rose, Rose, like that. 2 times. If you do not hear your name twice, you do not open. Do you hear me?" "Yes." "Say it back." "My name twice. Rose, Rose, or I don't open." "Good girl." He shut her inside. She heard the bolt slide. She pressed her back flat against the wood, and she put both hands over her mouth because she did not trust her own lungs not to cough at the worst possible moment. And she listened. A horse. 1 horse. Slowing. A man's voice. Pleasant. Too pleasant. "Afternoon, friend." Caleb's voice flat as a board. "Afternoon." "Mighty hot." "It is." "You'd be Mr. Boone." "I would. Name's Elias Crane. I work for a lady name of Martha Voss, out of Red Hollow." Rose's knees gave. She slid down the door and sat on the floor and put her face in her apron. Juno was beside her in a heartbeat pressed warm against her hip. "I know the name," Caleb said. She had a misunderstanding with you, about 2 weeks ago. Did she? Concerning a girl. A woman. A girl. A woman, Mr. Crane. Speak correctly on my porch. A pause. A woman, then. What about her? Miss Voss has had second thoughts about the arrangement. The arrangement she signed a receipt for. Well, sir, that receipt was drafted under some duress. Was it? And Miss Voss would like to recover the woman for further employment. She is willing to refund your $60 with an additional $20 for your trouble. $80, Mr. Boone. Cash money. Today. Silence. Rose stopped breathing. Mr. Crane. Sir. Do you see that gate yonder? I do. I want you to ride back through it. Mr. Boone. I want you to ride back through it, and I want you to tell Martha Voss that Rose Harper is a free woman of the United States of America, and that her debt is paid and her receipt is signed. And if Martha Voss sends another man up this road, that man is going to find out what my porch is made of. Mr. Boone, there's no need for threats. That was not a threat, Mr. Crane. That was a weather report. Ride. Yes, sir. Hooves. Walking. Then trotting. Then gone. Rose did not move. A long time passed. It might have been a minute. It might have been 10. Then Caleb's boot on the porch. Rose. Her name. Once. She did not move. Rose. Twice. She unbolted the door with shaking hands. He stood there with his hat in his hand and his face the color of old ash, and she looked up at him, and he looked down at her, and neither of them said a word for a long moment. Then he crouched down on his heels, so his eyes were level with hers, and he did not touch her, and he said very quietly, Rose Harper. Yes. I want you to listen to me. I'm listening. That was not the last man she is going to send. I know. The next one will not talk. I know. I need you to know something, and I need you to believe it because it is the only thing between us and the road from here on out. Are you listening? Yes, Caleb. That woman does not get you back. Not for $60, not for $600, not for $6,000, not ever. She does not get you back. Do you hear me? Yes. Say it. She does not get me back. Louder. She does not get me back. Rose Harper, who do you belong to? She opened her mouth and the old answer. Martha. I belong to Martha. I owe $42, ma'am. I'm sorry, ma'am. Came up her throat like bile, and she choked on it, and she swallowed it down, and she looked Caleb Boone in his gray Creekwater eyes, and she said in a voice she did not recognize as her own, Myself. I belong to myself. Caleb Boone, for the first time in 3 years, smiled. It was a small smile. It barely moved his mouth. But it reached his eyes, and it aged him backwards 10 years for a single breath, and Rose Harper saw in that breath the man he had been before the war had taken him apart. Yes, ma'am, he said. You surely do. He stood up. He put his hat back on. He walked out to the porch, and he sat down in the chair facing the road, and he laid the rifle across his knees, and he did not come in for supper that night, or the night after, or the night after that. He slept on the porch for a week, with one eye open, and Juno slept at his feet, and Rose Harper slept inside behind a bolted door, with her mother's Bible on the pillow beside her, and somewhere 10 miles south, a woman named Martha Voss was pressing another seal of red wax into another letter, and this time she was writing to a man who did not talk before he worked. For 7 days, Caleb Boone slept on his own porch, and Rose Harper slept behind a bolted door, and the road south stayed empty. On the 8th morning, the chestnut started screaming. Rose came out of the bedroom with her hair loose and her mother's Bible clutched to her chest like a shield, and she found Caleb already off the porch, already across the yard, rifle in one hand, and she heard him swear once low and ugly, the way a man swears when he has seen something he did not want to see. Caleb? Stay inside, ma'am. What's wrong with him? I said stay inside. Caleb, what is wrong with the horse? He did not answer. He ran his hand down the chestnut's neck. and the horse shied sideways, hard enough to nearly knock him flat. And then Rose saw the blood on Caleb's palm when he pulled it away, and the world tilted. "He's hurt." "A little." "Caleb." "Somebody cut him, ma'am. Shallow, along the shoulder. He'll live. It was not meant to kill him. It was meant to be found. Meant to be." "A message, Rose. It is a message." She sat down on the porch step because her legs would not hold her. Juno came and pressed against her knees, and she wound her fingers into the dog's rough yellow fur, and she tried to remember how to breathe in a way that did not cough. "He was in my barn," Caleb said almost to himself. "He was in my barn while we slept, 10 feet from the door." "Who?" "I do not know his name yet, ma'am, but I know his work." By noon, Caleb had ridden the fence line twice and come back with his jaw set in a line Rose had not seen before. By afternoon, he had nailed a second bolt into the back door and propped a chair under the latch of the root cellar. By dusk, he had moved the rifle from the mantel to the kitchen table and laid a second older pistol beside it, and he had cleaned them both without speaking, and Rose had watched him from across the room with her mending in her lap and the needle unmoving between her fingers. "Caleb." "Ma'am? Are you going to tell me?" "Tell you what?" "What you saw out there today." He set the cleaning rag down. "Tracks," he said. "One horse, shod. Not a cow pony. A big horse. He came up the dry wash from the south, cut across the north pasture, circled the cabin, twice stopped at the barn, long enough to smoke a cigarette, and left the way he came." "A cigarette. Tailor-made, not a cowboy roll. He left the end of it in the dirt by the trough." "That means something." "Yes, ma'am." "What?" "It means the man she sent this time can afford tailor-made cigarettes, which means the man she sent this time is not Elias Crane." Rose set her mending down. "Caleb." "Ma'am?" "There was a man in Red Hollow, before you. A man Martha called when one of us ran or stole or spoke back. I only saw him once. He had a scar across the bridge of his nose like somebody had tried to split his face with an axe. Martha called him Rafe." Caleb was very still. "Rafe Dillard." "Yes, that was it." "Rose Harper, look at me." She looked at him. "I need you to tell me every single thing you remember about that man. Every word you ever heard him say. Every step you ever saw him take. I do not care if you think it is not important. I will decide what is important. Can you do that for me?" "Yes." "Start," she told him. Her voice shook for the first 5 minutes and steadied after. She told him Rafe did not drink when he was working. She told him Rafe never raised his voice. She told him the girl he had come after her name was Annie. She was 17. She had run with a drover in May, had been found 3 weeks later in a ditch outside Bozeman with her neck broken and a note in her apron pocket that said, "Paid in full." She told him Rafe had smiled at Martha when he collected his fee, and the smile had not reached above his teeth. When she was done, Caleb walked out onto the porch and stood for a long time looking south. He came back in. He sat across from her at the table. He put both of his hands flat on the wood. "Rose Harper." "Yes. I need to say a thing to you now, and I need you to hear it the way I am saying it, not the way you are afraid to hear it. Is that a deal?" "That's a deal. The man who is coming here is not coming here to talk. He is not coming here to negotiate. He is not coming here to offer me $80 or $100 or $1,000. He is coming here because Martha Voss cannot let a woman walk out of her house alive, because the next woman in her house will see it, and walk out too, and her whole business falls apart. Do you understand?" "Yes." "So he is not going to knock on that door and ask me polite. He is going to come in the dark. He is going to come when he thinks we are tired. And he is going to come with a plan he has used before, and that has worked before." "Yes. Now, I can put you on the chestnut tonight. I can ride you to Willow Creek. I can put you on the morning stage to Helena. I can give you every dollar I have in that tin, which is not a lot, but will get you to a city where Martha Voss does not have a name. I can do that. You say the word and we ride in an hour." Rose's hands started to shake. She put them flat on the table to make them stop. Caleb? Ma'am. If I get on that stage? Yes. Does he stop coming for me? Caleb did not answer. Caleb, does he stop? No, ma'am. He does not. He will follow. That is the other thing he does. That is why Martha pays him and not another man. Then I don't see the point. The point is, you live a little longer. The point is, I run for the rest of my life. Rose? No. The word came out harder than she meant it to. Juno lifted her head off the rug. Caleb Boone. I have been run for 2 years. I ran from a mine that ate my husband. I ran from a boarding house that took my rent. I ran from a church that would not sit beside me after Thomas died because they said widows bring the sickness in. I ran into Martha's house because it was the only door left open, and I did not know what was on the other side of it until the door had already shut. I have been running so long I do not remember standing still. I will not get on that stage. Ma'am, I will not. Rose Harper, he is going to kill you. Then he is going to kill me here in a house I swept in a shirt I chose, with a man who asked my name before he touched my hand. That is a better death than the one he gave Annie in a ditch outside Bozeman, and it is the first death in 2 years that I get to pick. Caleb closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. He did not let the wet fall. He blinked it back the way a man blinks back a hard wind. Yes, ma'am, he said. All right. All right. All right, we stay. We make ready. You do what I tell you tomorrow night when the sun goes down without arguing, without asking twice because the time for arguing will be over. Is that a deal? That's a deal. Good. Caleb. Ma'am? Will you teach me to load the pistol? He looked at her for a long moment. Yes, ma'am. I will. He taught her that night. She held the old Colt in both hands, and she was not strong enough to cock the hammer on the first 3 tries, and on the 4th try she cocked it, and on the 5th try she cocked it faster, and by the 10th try her thumb was raw, but the hammer was going back smooth, and Caleb was nodding, and neither of them was smiling. The next morning he burned the wrong papers. Rose came in from feeding the hens, and she saw him at the kitchen table with the tin box from under the floorboard open in front of him, and he was tearing papers in half and dropping them into the stove, and she knew the box. Caleb, those are the ranch records. Some of them. What are you doing? Anything with your name on it. Anything with the date you came here. Anything that says Rose Harper. If he gets in this house while I am alive, he is not finding a single piece of paper that proves you were ever here. If he gets in this house when I am not, he is finding a house with no woman in it, and no sign there ever was one. Caleb. It is bookkeeping, ma'am. You understand bookkeeping. I understand bookkeeping. Then help me. She helped him. She went through the receipts he had not touched in 2 years, and she found 3 with her handwriting on them, already 3 in a week, and she fed them into the fire herself, and she watched her own letters curl up and go black and blow up the chimney. Then she went to the bedroom, and she took the receipt Martha Voss had written out in the dance hall, the $60 receipt Caleb had folded into his coat that first night, and she brought it back to the stove. Caleb. Ma'am? This one too. No, ma'am, that one I keep. Why? Because that one is not about you. That one is about her. And if I live through tomorrow night, that one goes to the federal marshal in Helena, and it goes with a letter I am writing tonight, and Martha Voss is going to learn what a receipt looks like from the other side of the desk. Rose stared at him. You planned this? I have been planning it since the morning I put the lock on your door. Caleb. Ma'am, why didn't you tell me? Because you were not strong enough to hear it yet. And I am now. Yes, ma'am, you surely are. The day crawled. The heat pressed the roof. Rose could not eat supper. Caleb ate a little slow and deliberate the way a soldier eats before a long march. Juno would not settle. She paced from the door to the window to the door, and Caleb let her, because Juno's nose was better than his. At 9:30, Juno froze. She did not bark. She did not growl. She went stiff from her shoulders to her tail, and her ears came forward, and her upper lip lifted 1/4 of an inch, and Caleb had the rifle in his hands before Rose had drawn her next breath. Bedroom. Caleb. Bedroom. Rose now. Bolt the door, under the bed. Pistol in your hand, hammer back, finger off the trigger until you see a face that is not mine. If the face is not mine, you aim for the belt buckle, and you squeeze, you do not pull. Squeeze. Go. Caleb, come with me. Go. She went. She heard the front door latch. She heard his boot on the porch. She heard the rifle's lever work once soft, and then silence, the kind of silence that has a man in it somewhere holding his breath. She slid under the bed with the Colt. She cocked it. She waited. A long minute, 2, 3. Then a voice from the yard, pleasant and slow and easy, a voice that slid into the cabin through the log walls like smoke through a crack. "Evening, Mr. Boone." Caleb did not answer. "Hot night." Caleb did not answer. "I come up to the gate quiet so as not to wake your lady. I understand she's been poorly." Silence. "Mr. Boone, I am going to step into the yard. I am going to keep my hands where you can see 'em. I am a reasonable man on a reasonable errand." Silence. Rose heard a boot on dirt, then another, then another. "There we are. You can see me plain. Name's Rafe Dillard. I believe we have a mutual acquaintance." "Stop where you are, Mr. Dillard." "Happy to." "Tell me your errand." "My errand is paper, Mr. Boone. I carry a warrant from the Justice of the Peace in Red Hollow, signed and sealed for the arrest of one Rose Harper on charges of theft from the premises of Miss Martha Voss. Total value of goods and services, $380. It is a lawful warrant. I am a lawful process server. I am not here as anything but a messenger of the court." "Show me the warrant." "Sir, I said show me the warrant." "It is in my saddlebag." "Then walk to your saddlebag, slow, and you bring it to me with your left hand, because I already know what your right hand does for a livin'." A pause. A long one. The kind of pause a man takes when he is adjusting a plan in his head. "Mr. Boone." "Mr. Dillard. You are making this harder than it needs to be." "I am making it exactly as hard as it needs to be." "There are 2 men on the ridge behind you." Rose's heart stopped. "Is that a fact?" "It is a fact." "Then it is a fact you just told me for free, Mr. Dillard. Thank you kindly." "Mr. Boone. Walk to your horse. Left hand. Warrant. Now." Rafe walked to his horse. Rose did not breathe. And then under the bed in the dark, Rose Harper understood 2 things at the same time. The first was that there was no warrant. A Justice of the Peace in Red Hollow would not issue a warrant for $380 against a widow without a hearing, and there had been no hearing, and Rafe Dillard did not carry paper. He carried pretexts. The second was that the moment Rafe's left hand went into the saddlebag, his right hand was going to come up with something that was not paper, and the 2 men on the ridge were going to fire on Caleb's back from 100 yards while he waited for a document that did not exist. She did not decide. Her body decided. She was out from under the bed before the thought finished. She was through the bedroom door before Juno could lift her head. She was across the kitchen floor in her bare feet, with the Colt in one hand and her other hand cupped around her mouth, and she did not open the front door, because opening the door would put her in Rafe Dillard's sights. So she did the only thing a woman with 1 lung and no time could do. She screamed Caleb's name out the side window. "Caleb, the ridge behind you, the ridge!" 2 things happened in the same half-second. Caleb dropped, and a rifle on the ridge fired. The bullet went through the place Caleb's head had been a 1/4 of a second earlier and splintered the porch post behind him. And then Caleb was rolling off the porch into the dirt, and Rafe Dillard's right hand was coming up out of the saddlebag with a short-barreled pistol in it, and Rose saw it through the window. She saw his hand come up. She saw the gun in it. She saw him turn toward the window she had just screamed out of. Toward her. Toward the place where her voice had come from. Rafe Dillard walked 3 steps toward the cabin with the pistol rising, and he said conversational, almost fond, "There you are, honey." Rose's knees locked. Her arm would not lift. Her throat closed. He is going to kill me here. In a house I swept. In a shirt I chose. With a man who asked my name before he touched my hand. And that is better than Annie in a ditch outside Bozeman. And it is the first death in 2 years that I get to pick. She lifted the Colt with both hands the way Caleb had taught her. She aimed for the belt buckle. She did not pull. She squeezed. The gun went off so loud in the small room that her ears filled with white. The window glass blew out. Rafe Dillard stopped walking. He looked down at himself, surprised, almost embarrassed, the way a man looks down at a stain on his shirt at a dinner party. Then he looked up at the window. Then he looked at Rose. And Rose saw the exact moment he understood that the widow from the dance hall had just put a bullet through his belt, because a very small smile crossed his face, almost proud, and then his knees went, and he sat down in the dirt, and he did not get up. Outside, the rifle on the ridge fired again. And then Caleb Boone fired once from the side of the porch, and the rifle on the ridge stopped firing. And then Caleb fired a second time from the other side of a wagon wheel. And a second rifle Rose had not known was out there stopped firing too. And then the yard was silent. The only sound in the world was Juno somewhere whining low in her throat, and Rose's own breath coming very fast and very wrong, and a man in the dirt outside the window trying to say a word that would not form. "Rose," Caleb's voice from the porch. "Rose." She did not move. "Rose Harper, you say something to me, right now." "I'm here." "Are you hit?" "I don't know." "Look at yourself, front of you, stomach, chest, thighs, blood, yes or no?" She looked. "No." "You sure?" "No blood, Caleb. No blood on me." "Stay inside. Do not come out. Do not come out. Rose, do you hear me?" "I hear you." She stayed inside. She heard him cross the yard. She heard him check Rafe. She heard him say very quietly, "Christ have mercy on you, Mr. Dillard, because I don't have it in me tonight." She heard him walk up the slope toward the ridge. She heard a long silence. She heard him come back down. She heard him check the far side of the wagon. She heard another long silence. When he came back to the porch, he did not come in right away. He sat down on the top step, and he put his head in his hands, and Rose heard through the broken window a sound she had never heard from a grown man before. It was not weeping exactly. It was the sound a man makes when he has done a thing he swore he would never do again, and the thing he swore it over rose up in him fresh. She put the Colt down on the table. She walked to the door. She unbolted it. She stepped out onto the porch in her bare feet with her hair loose, and she sat down beside him, not touching, and she did not say it's all right because it was not all right, and she did not say you had to because he knew that, and she did not say thank you because thank you was too small a word for what had happened and what was still going to happen. She said, "Caleb." "Ma'am." "Look at me." He did not look at her. "Caleb Boone, look at me." He looked at her. His eyes were not gray anymore. They were the color of something burning. "You are not the man you were in the war." "Rose, you are not. I do not care what you did then. I do not care who you were. I will not hear it tonight, and I will not hear it tomorrow. Tonight you saved my life. Tonight I saved yours. Tonight 2 of us did a thing because there was no other thing to do, and tomorrow we will bury what needs burying, and then we will sit down at that table, and we will write a letter to the marshal in Helena, and we will put Martha Voss's name on it, and we will put her receipt in the envelope, and we will end this. Do you hear me?" "Yes, ma'am." "Say it." "I hear you." "Say my name." "Rose Harper." "Yes." "Rose." "Yes." He did not cry. He did not reach for her. He sat on the porch step with his rifle across his knees and his hat on the boards beside him. And the summer wind came up out of the dry grass and moved his hair. And Rose Harper sat beside him in her bare feet, with Martha Voss's man dead in her yard and 2 more dead on the ridge. And she understood for the first time in her life that there were some women the world could break and some women the world could not, and she did not yet know which kind she was, but she knew which kind she was becoming. They sat on the porch until the sky started to turn gray. Neither one of them slept. Neither one of them spoke much either. Juno came out once and laid her head on Caleb's boot, and then went back inside as if she understood that this was a thing that had to be sat through and not fixed. When the first yellow line broke along the east, Caleb stood up. Rose. Caleb. I have to move them before the sun is all the way up. I'll help. No, ma'am. Caleb. Rose Harper, you have done enough things tonight that a woman should not have to do. You are not doing this one. You stay on this porch. You drink the coffee I am going to bring you. You keep Juno inside. I will do this work. It is mine. She did not fight him. She did not have the fight in her. He brought her coffee in the tin cup he drank out of every morning, and she held it in both hands, and the hands were shaking so bad the coffee rocked against the rim, and she drank it anyway because he had made it. Then he put on his hat, and he walked out to the yard, and he did what had to be done, and Rose Harper sat with her back against the porch post, and she closed her eyes and she did not watch. He wrapped Rafe Dillard in an old canvas. He rode up to the ridge, and he did the same for the two men up there. He dug in the hard summer ground for 3 hours straight past the far line of the north pasture, where the rocks came up out of the dirt. And he came back to the cabin with his shirt stuck to his back, and his hands blistered through his gloves, and his face the color of ash under the dust. He walked past her without speaking. He went to the pump. He pumped water into a bucket. He stripped off his shirt, and he washed his hands and his arms and his neck, scrubbing so hard, Rose winced watching him, as if he could scrub the last 12 hours off his skin. He could not. She knew he could not. He knew it too. He scrubbed anyway. When he came back to the porch, he had a clean shirt on, and his hair was wet and combed flat. Rose. Caleb. I need to go to town. Her stomach turned over. No. Ma'am. Caleb, no. Please, not today, not alone. They will... Rose. They will see you, and they will know something happened. Martha will know. She will send me Rose Harper. She stopped. I am not going to Red Hollow. I am going to Willow Creek. That is the other direction. Willow Creek has a telegraph and a post office and a sheriff who has hated Martha Voss for 6 years and has been waiting for a reason to prove it. I am going to send the letter to the marshal in Helena. I am going to send it with Martha's receipt folded inside it. And I am going to come back. That is all. Take me with you. Ma'am, you cannot ride 14 miles today. I can. Rose, you coughed blood 2 hours ago. She stopped because he was right. She had. She had thought he had not seen. He had seen. Caleb. Ma'am. If you do not come back by sundown. I will come back by sundown. If you do not, Rose Harper, I will come back by sundown. You saddle the chestnut yourself if I am not on this porch by the time the shadow of the barn touches the well. You hear me? You take the chestnut, and you take the rifle, and you take the tin from under the floorboard, and you ride north. Not south, not west. North. Straight north to a town called Two Medicine, and you ask for a woman named Winifred Boone, and you tell her who you are, and you tell her what happened, and she will know what to do. Rose blinked. Who is Winifred Boone? My sister, ma'am. You have a sister. I do. You never said. No, ma'am, I did not. Does she know about me? She knows there is a woman in my cabin. I wrote her a letter 3 weeks ago. I have not sent it yet. It is in the tin with the money. If I do not come back, you read it before you ride, and then you burn it, and then you go. Caleb. That is the plan, Rose. Yes, sir. Caleb. Caleb. He rode out at 7 in the morning, and he did not look back, and Rose Harper stood on the porch with Juno leaning against her knee until the chestnut was a small, dark shape on the road, and then it was no shape at all. And then she went inside, and she sat down at the kitchen table, and she put her head down on her arms, and she wept the way a person weeps when the danger has passed the immediate and settled into the long. She did not read the letter. She wanted to. She wanted to more than she wanted water. But the tin was under the floorboard, and Caleb had trusted her with the knowledge of where the floorboard was, and she decided sitting there with her cheek against the wood of the table that she was going to be a woman who was worthy of that trust even when the man who gave it to her was not in the house to see it. So she got up. She washed the coffee cups. She swept the kitchen. She swept the porch. She did not look at the place in the yard where Rafe Dillard had sat down in the dirt. She scrubbed the window frame where the glass had blown out, and she found a splinter of bone in the grain of the wood, and she pried it out with a knife, and she put it in the stove, and she watched it burn. The shadow of the barn crept across the yard all day long. At 4 in the afternoon, the shadow was at the edge of the woodpile. At 5, it was at the corner of the chicken coop. At 6, it was 2 feet from the well. At 6:30, it touched the stone rim of the well, and Rose Harper stood up, and she walked to the bedroom, and she put on her boots. At 6:45, she put the rifle by the front door. At 7, she opened the tin under the floorboard. The letter was on top, folded 3 times. No envelope, her name on it in Caleb's careful handwriting. Miss Rose Harper. She sat down on the floor with it. She did not open it. She held it. At 7:04, she heard a horse on the road. She was out the door before she had the letter folded back. She stopped at the porch post with the rifle against her leg and the paper pressed to her chest, and she watched the dark shape come up the road, and it was the chestnut, and it was Caleb. And she went down the porch steps with her boots unlaced and her hair coming loose, and she crossed the yard in a stumbling half-run, and when he swung off the horse, she did not say a word. She walked up to him, and she put her face against his shirt, and she closed her eyes. Caleb Boone stood there with the reins in one hand and his hat in the other, and his sister's letter between Rose's chest and his, and he did not move for a long count. Then very slowly, like a man setting his hand on something that might break, he laid his palm flat against the back of her head. "Rose Harper, I thought you were dead. I know you did. I thought they got you on the road. I thought somebody saw you coming out of the telegraph office. I thought, Rose, I thought I was going to have to burn your letter without reading it because you would be dead, and I could not bear to read a dead man's letter, Caleb. I could not. Rose. Yes. You can read it, right now if you want. I am not dead. You can read it to my face." She started laughing. It came out wrong, hitched up in her chest, more a cough than a laugh. But it was the first sound that had left her body in 12 hours that was not grief. "Come inside," she said. "Come inside, you foolish man. Come inside, I have supper." She did have supper. Bean soup with a little bacon. A loaf she had baked between 6 and 7 that morning, in the shaking hour after he rode out. She had not believed she would live to feed it to him. She fed it to him now. He ate. He ate slow. He ate 2 bowls, and then he laid his spoon down and he said, "Rose." "Yes. I sent the letter." "I know. I spoke to the sheriff in Willow Creek personally. His name is Thaddeus Cole. He is riding to Helena himself tonight. Not sending. Riding. He will put Martha Voss's receipt in the hand of the federal marshal by Wednesday. He will also be bringing sworn statements from 3 girls who left Martha's house in the last year and are willing to testify now that a man is carrying the paper for them. 3 girls. 3 Rose. Who? Lottie Mears is one. Rose's hand came up to her mouth. "Lottie. She walked out of the dance hall the morning after you did. She said if Martha could not keep you, she could not keep Lottie either. She is boarding with the preacher's widow in Willow Creek. She asked after you. She cried when I told her you were alive." Rose put her face in her apron. Caleb waited. When she came back up, her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. "Caleb." "Ma'am? Did anyone in Red Hollow see you today?" "No, ma'am. I did not go to Red Hollow. Does Martha know?" "She will know by tomorrow. 3 men did not come home. A woman in her line of work understands arithmetic. Then she will send again. She might." "Caleb. Rose. How many men does she have?" He looked at her across the lamplight. "After last night, Rose Harper, she has considerably fewer than she had on Sunday." Rose did not smile. She did not have a smile in her yet. But something in her sternum loosened a 1/4 of an inch, and she drew the first full breath she had taken since the rifle on the ridge had fired, and the breath did not cough. They sat at the table for a long time that night, and did not talk about the yard. She asked him instead about his sister. "Winifred." "Yes. Younger than me. She is 32. She has a husband named of Asa and 3 children and a dairy farm north of here that she runs better than any man in the territory runs his own. She is a hard woman, Rose. She does not waste a word. You would like her. She would like you. You wrote to her about me. I did. What did you say? Caleb picked up the letter off the table. He looked at it. He set it back down. Rose Harper, that letter is yours now. I wrote it 3 weeks ago, and I could not send it because I did not know yet what I was asking my sister to make room for. You read it when you are ready. You do not have to read it tonight. You do not have to read it at all. If you never read it, I will rewrite the part of my life that comes next without it, and you will never know what was in it, and that will be fine. Caleb. Ma'am? Stop talking. He stopped talking. She opened the letter. It was not long. It was 3 paragraphs in a working man's hand, with the letters cramped close together, the way a man writes who taught himself his letters late. Winnie. There is a woman here. Her name is Rose Harper. She is a widow out of the Copperhead mine. She has been used bad and she is sick, and she does not yet know that she is going to get better. I did not take her in because she is beautiful, which she is, and I did not take her in because she needed taken in, which she did. I took her in because I could not bear one more night of knowing a woman was being hurt a mile from where I slept, and I have been sleeping a mile from where women were being hurt for 3 years, and I am tired of being that man, Winnie. I am tired. If anything happens to me on a summer night for the rest of this season, it will be on account of her, and I will not regret it. You put her up. You give her the room off the kitchen. You teach her the dairy if she wants to learn it, and you leave her alone if she does not. You do not ask her what happened to her in Red Hollow. If she wants to tell you, she will tell you, and if she does not, she will not, and you will not press. She is a good woman, Winnie. I believe she is the best woman I have met since Mother died. Do not let anything happen to her on my account. Your brother who loves you, Caleb. Rose read it twice. She folded it. She set it back on the table between them. She looked at Caleb Boone across the lamplight, and he looked back at her, and he did not ask her what she thought, and he did not ask her anything. Caleb? Ma'am. You said I am the best woman you have met since your mother died. Yes, ma'am, I did. Did you mean that? I did. Caleb, I have never written a word to my sister I did not mean. She would know. Winnie would know in a breath. Rose put both her hands flat on the table, the way he had done the night before. Caleb Boone. Rose Harper. I am not a well woman. I know that. I cough blood some nights still. I may do it again tonight. I do not know how many summers I have. I know that too, Rose. I cannot promise you a long life. Rose, I am not asking for one. I have had a long life already. It has been a bad long life. I would rather a short, good one. Caleb. Ma'am? Please stop being so plain about it. You are going to make me cry again, and I have cried more in the last 2 days than I have in 2 years. Yes, ma'am. Caleb. Ma'am? I think I would like to meet your sister. Caleb did not smile. He nodded once slow, the way a man nods when a door he did not know was locked has just opened. Yes, ma'am, he said. I reckon she would like to meet you too. That night, he slept in front of the hearth again, but the bedroll was not tight-wrapped, the way it had been the first week. It was half unrolled, the way a man lays himself down, who does not expect to leap up at the first sound. Juno slept at his feet. The rifle was on the mantel, not in his hand. Rose slept behind a bolted door because habit is a slow thing to break. But sometime after midnight, she heard Caleb cough in his sleep, and she got up, and she walked to her door, and she turned the bolt back, and she left it open. She slept the rest of the night with her door open. In the morning, Caleb did not mention it. He made coffee. He poured her a cup. He set it across the table from his own. He looked at the open bedroom door behind her, and he looked back at his cup, and he cleared his throat. Mornin', ma'am. Mornin', Caleb. Sleep well. Better? Glad to hear it. They rode to town 3 days later, when Rose's lungs had steadied enough that Caleb was willing to put her on a horse. Not Red Hollow, Willow Creek. She wore a clean gray dress. Winnie's hand-me-down box had once sent, and her hair was braided down her back, and she sat behind Caleb on the chestnut, with her arms around his ribs, and she coughed twice in 12 miles, and both times the cloth came away clean. Lottie Mears came out of the preacher's widow's front door when she saw them on the road. She ran. She ran barefoot in the dust with her skirt up to her knees and her dyed brass hair coming loose behind her, and she did not stop until her arms were around Rose's waist and Rose was off the horse. And the two of them stood in the middle of the road in Willow Creek, holding each other and crying so hard that 3 townspeople stopped on the boardwalk, and 2 more came out of the general store to see, and none of them said a word. Rose. Lottie. Rose, I thought he killed you. I thought Rafe is dead, Lottie. What? He is dead. He is buried. He is in the ground on Caleb's north pasture, and he is not coming back for me, and he is not coming back for you. Lottie pulled back and looked at Rose's face as if she had never seen it before. Rose Harper. Lottie, you did it. Caleb did it. No, you did it. I can see it on you. I can see it in your eyes. You did a thing, Rose. Rose did not answer right away. She looked past Lottie at the boardwalk, at the people watching, at the woman in the doorway of the general store holding a broom. 2 years ago, any one of them would have looked through her like she was a window. Today, they were looking at her like she was a person. Yes, Lottie, she said quietly. I did a thing. That evening, in the back room of the Willow Creek Sheriff's Office, with Caleb standing behind her chair, and Lottie sitting on her left, and a girl named June Ellery sitting on her right. Rose Harper signed her name under a sworn statement, 3 pages long. She wrote it out in her own hand. She used all the words she had been told for 2 years she was not permitted to use. She wrote the word debt, and she wrote the word beating, and she wrote the name Annie, and she wrote the word ditch, and she wrote the word Bozeman, and she wrote the word bounty, and she wrote at the very end the 4 words Caleb had asked her to say on his porch a week earlier. I belong to myself. She signed her name under those 4 words. Rose Harper, widow, of Red Hollow, Montana Territory. Sheriff Thaddeus Cole looked at the paper for a long time after she set the pen down. He was a man in his 50s with a square jaw and a mustache gone white at the ends. He read her statement twice. He read it a 3rd time. When he looked up, his eyes were wet, and he did not pretend they were not. Mrs. Harper? Sir? In 22 years of law in this territory, I have not read a cleaner statement than this one. Thank you, sir. Federal Marshal is going to want to meet you. That is going to mean a ride to Helena, possibly a courtroom, possibly a trial with Miss Voss across the aisle. Are you up to that? Rose sat very still. She felt Caleb's hand for the first time since she had come to his cabin lay itself on her shoulder. Not gripping, just there, warm, steady, asking nothing. Sir, she said. 2 weeks ago I was on the floor of her dance hall, and I could not breathe and I could not stand. Tonight I am in your office, and I can do both. I can ride to Helena. I can sit in her courtroom. I can say these words to her face. Yes, sir, I am up to that. Thaddeus Cole nodded once. Yes, ma'am, he said. I believe you are. The ride to Helena took 4 days. Sheriff Thaddeus Cole rode with them, and so did a deputy named Henry Pike, and so did Lottie Mears and June Ellery, and so did a girl of 19 named Clementine Ross, who had walked out of Martha Voss's back door on the evening she heard Rafe Dillard was not coming home. They went in a slow, small column along the old stage road north, and Caleb Boone rode at the rear with his rifle across the saddle and his eyes on every ridge they passed, because a woman like Martha Voss had connections, and connections had longer arms than a bounty hunter. Rose Harper rode the chestnut now, her own horse. Caleb had walked her out to the corral the morning they left and put the reins in her hand, and he had said, Rose, and she had said, Caleb, and he had said, this horse is yours. From this morning forward, you do not borrow him. He is yours. The paper is in the saddlebag in case anyone on the road asks. And she had put her forehead against the chestnut's warm summer neck, and she had cried into his mane for 30 seconds exactly. And then she had wiped her face and swung up, and she had not asked for help. She did not cough once on the road to Helena. That was the first thing. She noticed it on the second morning, and she did not let herself trust it. She noticed it on the third morning, and she still did not trust it. On the fourth morning, when they came down off the last ridge and saw the rooftops of Helena, lying in the bowl of the valley under the hard summer sun, Caleb reined up beside her. "Rose." "Caleb." "3 days, ma'am." "I know. You know what I am saying. I know what you are saying. I am not saying you are cured. I am saying your lungs have had 3 days of clean air and steady food and no one laying a hand on you, and they are already saying thank you." "Caleb." "Ma'am." "Please do not make me cry on the approach to a federal courthouse." "Yes, ma'am." The federal marshal was a man named Abraham Dolan, and he had a gray mustache and a short temper and 28 years of reasons to hate people like Martha Voss. He read Rose's statement in his office while she sat in a hardback chair across the desk from him, with her hands folded in her lap, and when he was done, he set the paper down, and he took his spectacles off, and he rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Mrs. Harper." "Sir, I am going to ask you something, and I would like an honest answer." "Yes, sir." "Are you afraid?" Rose thought about it. She thought about it for longer than a woman is supposed to think about a question in front of a federal marshal. "Sir," she said finally, "2 weeks ago I was afraid of a doorknob. Today I am afraid of a courtroom. That is an improvement, sir, and I do not intend to go backwards." Abraham Dolan looked at her for a long count. Then he put his spectacles back on, and he reached across the desk, and he shook her hand, and he said, "Mrs. Harper, I am going to put Martha Voss in federal custody by Friday. You have my word." He did. He rode out of Helena on Thursday morning with 12 deputies and a federal warrant, and they rode into Red Hollow on Friday at noon. And Martha Voss was arrested standing behind the long pine bar of her own dance hall in a green silk dress. And she did not say a word while they walked her out, because a woman like Martha Voss understood arithmetic, and the arithmetic of 12 deputies with 1 warrant had only one answer. She was held in Helena awaiting trial. The trial was set for the second week of September, and in the 6 weeks between the arrest and the trial, Rose Harper did a thing she had not done in 2 years. She healed. It was not a straight line. There were nights she woke up screaming, and Caleb came to her door and spoke her name through the wood twice, and she opened the bolt, and he sat on the floor outside her room until her breathing went slow again, and neither of them spoke of it in the morning. There were mornings she looked at herself in the small washstand mirror and did not recognize the woman looking back, and she sat down on the edge of the bed and shook for 10 minutes before she could face the kitchen. There were afternoons she would be walking across the yard with an empty bucket, and she would hear a horse on the road, and her legs would lock, and Caleb would have to call her name twice from the porch before her knees would move again, but her cough softened. Then it went. Her weight came back. Not all of it. Not fast, but enough that Winnie Boone, when she finally met Rose at the beginning of August, looked her up and down once and said, "Caleb wrote me you were half a bird. You are not half a bird anymore, Mrs. Harper. You are 3/4 of a woman, and the last quarter is just a matter of pie, and I make a good pie." Rose laughed out loud. It was the first full laugh out of her in 2 years, and it surprised her so much she clapped her hand over her mouth, and Winnie Boone, who was indeed a hard woman, exactly as her brother had described, square-shouldered and gray-eyed and sparing of every word, smiled for the first time that afternoon and said, "Oh good, you laugh. I was worried." Winnie stayed a week. She slept on the cot by the hearth, and she got up before Caleb did, and she did not ask Rose a single question about Red Hollow, exactly as her brother had asked her not to. Instead, she taught Rose the dairy, as if Rose had asked for the teaching though Rose had not, and she sat with Rose on the porch in the evenings, and talked about the price of butter, and the weather in the Marias River country, and her oldest boy's reading lessons, and one night apropos of nothing she said, "Rose Harper." "Yes, Winnie." "My brother has not smiled in 3 years." "I know." "He smiled yesterday. Twice." "Winnie, I am not asking you a question, Rose. I am reporting a fact. I am a woman who reports facts. Good night." And she went to bed. Rose sat on the porch for another hour after Winnie had gone in. Caleb came out and sat beside her. Not close, not far. In the chair that had become his chair with his hat in his hand, the way it always was now when it was just the two of them. "Caleb." "Ma'am?" "Your sister is a menace." "I know it, Rose." "She said you have smiled twice this week." "She counted, did she?" "She counted." "Well, is it true?" "Rose Harper, I have not kept count, but I will allow that in the last month I have done a thing with my face I did not do in the 3 years before it, and I reckon your sister is more reliable in her arithmetic than I am." Rose looked at her hands in her lap. "Caleb." "Ma'am." "Rose." "Rose. Why do you keep calling me ma'am?" "Habit, ma'am." "Caleb." "Yes, Rose." "Stop." "Yes, Rose." The trial happened on the 11th of September. Rose wore the gray dress that had come out of Winnie's hand-me-down box. Lottie wore a blue one. June and Clementine wore whatever they had. They sat in the front row of the courtroom in Helena, and Caleb Boone sat directly behind Rose with his hat on his knee and his gray Creekwater eyes fixed on the back of Martha Voss's head across the aisle. Martha did not look at Rose once. Not when Rose walked in. Not when Rose was sworn. Not when Rose sat down in the witness chair and laid her hands flat on the wood in front of her, the way Caleb laid his hands flat on the kitchen table when he was about to say something that mattered. The prosecutor was a young man named Everett Hayes, and he had freckles and a stammer, and Rose had worried about him for a week. She stopped worrying about him 3 minutes into his opening because Everett Hayes, without his freckles and his stammer, was a young man with a steel spine and a gift for building a sentence like a brick wall. "Mrs. Harper," he said, "can you tell this court in your own words how you came to be in the employment of Miss Martha Voss in the month of May, 1874? Rose told them. She told them about Thomas. She told them about the mine. She told them about the 5 minutes he prayed over his boots. She told them about the rent. She told them about the church that would not sit beside her. She told them about the sign in the window of the dance hall that said, 'Rooms honest work fair terms,' and she told them how the terms had changed the week after she had moved in, and the week after that, and the week after that, until the debt Martha read out of the ledger was 3 times what Rose had ever signed for, and there was no one to read the ledger against. She told them about the first slap. She told them about the first night. She told them about Annie in the ditch outside Bozeman, and the note in the apron pocket, and the words paid in full. She told them about the blood on the floor on the night a cowboy had stood up. She did not cry. She had cried for 2 years. She was done crying in rooms where Martha Voss could hear it. When Everett Hayes sat down the defense attorney, a Helena lawyer named Pritchard, who had been paid very well, and knew it, stood up, and he cleared his throat and he said, "Mrs. Harper, were you not a voluntary employee of my client?" "No, sir." "You signed a contract." "I signed a boarding agreement, sir. I never signed a dance hall contract. Miss Voss wrote one later and added my name to the bottom in her own hand. The signature is not mine. My signature is on the statement in front of you. You can hold the two side by side." Pritchard paused. He had not expected that. "Mrs. Harper, the prosecution has produced—" "Sir." "Mrs. Harper, I have not finished my—" "Sir." The judge, an old man with white hair, leaned forward. "Mrs. Harper, you will let the gentleman finish his question." "Yes, Your Honor. I am sorry, Your Honor. I would like the record to show one thing first, if the court will allow." "What is the thing, Mrs. Harper?" Rose looked across the courtroom at Martha Voss, and for the first time that day, Martha Voss looked back. Their eyes met. Rose did not flinch. "Your Honor," she said in a voice as steady as a level, "I would like the record to show that I am the widow of Thomas Harper of the Copperhead Mine, that I am 24 years of age, that I am a citizen of the United States of America, that I am not in debt to Miss Martha Voss or any other person living, and that I belong to myself." The courtroom was silent. Martha Voss's mouth opened and closed once. The judge very quietly said, "So noted, Mrs. Harper. The record will show." Pritchard did not recover. He tried. He asked 3 more questions, and Rose answered all 3 without raising her voice, and by the 4th question, he had stopped looking at her, and by the 6th, he sat down, and the jury came back in 41 minutes, and Martha Voss was convicted on 6 of the 7 counts against her, including the trafficking count, and the judge sentenced her to 20 years in the federal penitentiary at Detroit, and he did not bang his gavel so much as set it down on the bench, like a man laying down a tool he was glad to be done with. Rose did not cry in the courtroom. She cried afterward in the hallway, with Lottie's arms around her, and Caleb standing 3 feet away with his hat in his hand and his jaw working. Rose? Caleb. Ma'am? Caleb, it is over. Yes, Rose, it is over. They went home. Home was the cabin 10 miles north of Red Hollow, on a piece of dry summer land, with a good well and a mended barn, and a chestnut gelding, who now had a smaller bay mare for company, because Caleb had bought her in Helena on the afternoon after the verdict, and led her home behind the chestnut the entire way. And Rose had laughed when she saw her, and Caleb had said, "A woman who owns one horse and rides another is a woman borrowing against her own life. You ride your own from here on out." And Rose had said, "Yes, Caleb," and had named the mare Annie on the spot, and Caleb had taken his hat off and held it against his chest for a minute, and had not said a word. That summer did not end right away. There was still August. There was still the first week of September past the trial hot and gold and full of cicadas. There was the north pasture that did not get mentioned. There was the broken window that Caleb fixed one afternoon, while Rose sat in the porch shade and read to him out of her mother's Bible. Not the passages people expected a widow to read, but the quieter ones, the ones about fields and harvests and women at wells. There was Lottie Mears coming up the road once a week to sit on the porch with Rose and talk about nothing and everything, and there was June Ellery writing from Willow Creek that she had been hired as a school teacher in a town called Miles City, and there was Clementine Ross, who had married a blacksmith in Bozeman and sent Rose a jar of blackberry preserves with a note that said only, "From one who got out, to one who got me out, C.R." Rose kept the note. She kept all of them. She started a small drawer in the kitchen of letters from women who were, or had been, or were afraid they might be where Rose had once been. She answered every one of them in her own hand. She told them what she knew. She told them what Caleb had told her on the porch that first week. She told them that a debt a person did not know how to pay back was sometimes not a debt at all. She told them that ma'am was a word a woman could use on herself. On a Sunday in the second week of September, Caleb walked into the kitchen with his hat in his hand and sawdust in his hair and something in his closed fist. Rose. Caleb. Come outside a minute. She wiped her hands on her apron. She came outside. He had built her a porch swing. He had been building it for a week in the barn, and she had pretended not to notice. It hung from the rafters of the porch on 2 lengths of braided rope, and the wood was cedar, and it still smelled sweet, and there was a small carved rose on the end of the left armrest, where her hand would go when she sat down. Caleb. Rose. You made me a porch swing. I did. Caleb. Rose, that is not all I made. He opened his fist. In his palm was a ring. Not a fine ring. A plain ring, hammered from a piece of the old copper wire Thomas Harper had strung through the Copperhead mine, which Caleb had bought for $1 from a scrap hauler in Willow Creek 2 weeks earlier, without telling her why, because he had asked the hauler quietly if any of the wire had come out of the Copperhead, and the hauler had said yes, some had, and Caleb had paid the $1, and he had carried the wire home in his pocket, and he had hammered it in the forge behind the barn on 3 evenings, while Rose thought he was mending a hinge. Rose looked at the ring. She looked at Caleb. She understood in the space of one breath where the copper had come from, and what he had made out of it, and what he was asking, and what he was saying about her husband, by asking it with this particular metal on this particular porch. Caleb Boone. Rose Harper. You give me one good reason I should say yes. Caleb took his hat off. He held it against his chest. Rose. He said, I cannot give you a long life. I cannot give you a young husband. I cannot give you a clean conscience because mine is not clean. I cannot give you a house bigger than this one, or a road that does not run past Red Hollow, or a summer that is not going to end in a month. What I can give you is this porch and this ring and this swing, and a promise that I will not lay a hand on you in anger for as long as I draw breath, and a promise that if you ever want to go, the chestnut is yours, and the mare is yours, and the money in the tin is yours, and the road is yours, and I will open the gate, and I will not ask you why. That is all I have, Rose. It is not much, but it is yours if you want it." Rose Harper did not cry. She had cried enough. She took one step forward. She took the ring out of his palm. She put it on her own finger, her left hand, the one that had worn Thomas's ring for 6 years and worn nothing for 2. She held her hand up in the gold afternoon light. It fit. Caleb Boone. "Rose. That is a good reason." "Yes, Rose." "Caleb." "Yes. Sit down on this swing with me." He sat down on the swing with her. They did not kiss. Not then. Caleb Boone was a man who had learned to move at the speed a wounded woman could move, and Rose Harper was a woman who had learned that the man sitting beside her would wait as long as was needed. And so they sat, and the swing creaked, and Juno came up onto the porch and laid her head on Rose's foot, and the chestnut looked at them once from the corral and looked away. They were married 3 weeks later on a Saturday in the yard of Winnie Boone's dairy farm, north of 2 Medicine, by a Methodist circuit rider who had known Caleb's mother. Winnie cried. Asa cried harder. Lottie Mears was the witness on Rose's side. Thaddeus Cole rode up from Willow Creek and stood at the back in his Sunday coat, and did not say a word, but did not leave until every last person had eaten. Rose wore a pale blue dress she had sewn herself in August, and her hair was down her back in a single braid, and she was not half a bird anymore, and she was not 3/4 of a woman anymore. And Winnie Boone, looking at her across the yard, leaned into her brother and said, "Caleb, that is a whole person." Caleb said, "Yes, Winnie, she is." Rose Harper Boone lived another 22 years. Her lungs did not come all the way back. They did not have to. She carried her mother's Bible in her lap on winter evenings, and she ran the ranch books so tight that a federal examiner in 1881 said out loud in her kitchen that he had never seen cleaner bookkeeping in the territory. She took in 4 more women over the years. She did not ask any of them what had happened to them. She gave them the room off the kitchen, and she taught them bookkeeping if they wanted to learn, and she left them alone if they did not. 2 of them stayed. 2 of them moved on to lives of their own. All 4 of them wrote her letters for the rest of her life, and she kept every one. She and Caleb Boone never had children of their own. They raised 3 anyway. The first was a boy whose mother had died of fever on a wagon train in 1879 and whose father had ridden off and not come back. The second was a girl Lottie Mears brought up the road in 1882 and could not keep, and Rose took her in and raised her, and the girl grew up and became a schoolteacher in Bozeman, and she named her own first daughter Rose. The third was Lottie's boy 10 years later when Lottie died of pneumonia in a hard winter, and Rose buried Lottie herself in the cemetery in Willow Creek and brought the boy home in the same saddle she had first ridden out of Red Hollow in. Caleb Boone died in the spring of 1896 in his own bed with Rose's hand in his. He was 58 years old. He had not raised a hand in anger in 22 years, and he had not raised a gun in 18, and the last thing he said to her was her name, plain the way he had said it on a porch a long time ago. "Rose." "Caleb." "Ma'am?" "I'm here." Good. Rose Harper Boone outlived him by 4 years. She died on a July morning in 1900 on the porch swing he had built her with the copper ring on her finger, and Juno's great-great-granddaughter asleep at her feet. Winnie's youngest boy found her. He said she looked like she had sat down for a rest and not gotten back up, and her face was turned toward the road, and she was smiling. They buried her beside Caleb on the rise above the north pasture, under a cottonwood she had planted herself, the summer she got well. The stone they set said 4 things. It said her name. It said the year she was born. It said the year she died. And under all 3 in letters she had picked out for herself 10 years before, on an afternoon when Caleb had asked her what she wanted the stone to say, it said, She belonged to herself. This was not the story of a cowboy who rescued a broken woman. This was the story of a beaten widow who walked out of a dance hall on a summer night, put a bullet through the man sent to drag her back, looked a federal judge in the eye, and lived long enough to teach 4 more women to do the same. She was sick. She was poor. She was used. She was almost dead. And she still, in the end, belonged to no one on this earth but herself. That is the story. That is the whole story. And any woman who hears it tonight and has ever been told she was too sick, too old, too used, or too far gone to be worth saving. You listen to me now, and you hear Rose Harper Boone, and you remember the world does not get to decide what you are worth. You do, and you always did. And